West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Former President Donald Trump has been asking his lawyers repeatedly to get my documents back. That's according to new reporting from Rolling Stone. And now Trump's legal team is actually trying to lay the groundwork to retrieve some of the classified papers seized by the feds. So what exactly is in those documents that Donald Trump wants so desperately to get back? Well, here's what we know so far. When he left office in January of 2021, Trump took more than 700 pages of classified documents, including some related to the nation's most covert intelligence operations. That's according to a letter the National Archives sent to Trump's legal team in May. In January of this year, Trump had initially complied with the National Archives request and handed over 15 boxes with documents from the CIA, the National Security Agency, and the FBI. But those boxes, well, they arrived at the National Archives with no inventory, no logs, and they contained a hodgepodge of documents, some of which didn't even come from Trump's tenure in the White House. And investigators knew some crucial documents were still missing. For instance, Trump's original letters from the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un and the note that President Barack Obama left Trump before he left office. That's according to the New York Times. And then came the search of Mar-a-Lago when, according to the Times, FBI investigators took more than 300 documents with classified markings. During the search, the FBI retrieved 26 boxes, including 11 sets of material marked as classified. Two people familiar with the search told the Washington Post that some of the documents contained extraordinarily sensitive information, which could reveal how the United States gathers intelligence. One of the sources said that the info Trump was holding on to was, quote, among the most sensitive secrets we hold. Some of the items in those 11 sets of documents included information about French President Emmanuel Macron, handwritten notes, photos, and other top secret materials. And now we're learning more about just how long this push and pull between the National Archives and the former president has been going on. The Washington Post just obtained an email that the National Archives sent to Trump's lawyers back in May of 2021, just a few months after he left office, saying roughly 24 boxes of records stored in the White House residence had not been returned. And Trump's own lawyer, Pat Cipollone, determined that those classified documents should be handed over. So why weren't they returned immediately? Why did Donald Trump insist on holding onto these documents over and over again? And even after the search of Mar-a-Lago, why does he want them back so badly? Joining me now is National Security Attorney Bradley Moss. Brad, welcome to the show. I want to start off by talking about the deficiencies in this case. As we know, Trump filed a civil action in another courthouse in front of a whole other judge when he should have just filed his motion before the magistrate judge, Bruce Reinhart, who's already dealing with the Mar-a-Lago search warrant. Brad, is Trump's legal team really that bad?
You know, it's hard to say they're not, given what we've seen so far from them. Putting aside how horribly written that motion was that they filed before the new judge in that other courthouse, throughout this process, as we've been learning the details of what went on behind the scenes for 18 months, there's a number of times where they could have intervened, brought motions to stop this from ever getting this far if they thought their clients' arguments had merit. They knew in May that the National Archives was turning over the classified records to the FBI and was rejecting the executive privilege claim that Trump was trying to invoke. They didn't file anything then. They didn't file anything after June when there was a subpoena and the records were seized at that point. They waited 2 weeks after the search warrant to even bring this before another judge instead of going before Judge Reinhart. It's not exactly been a display of competent lawyering at any stage of the process by Trump's legal team. And it really makes you wonder, does he have, aside from the money, which I'm sure he's got enough of, does he have the ability to hire the proper kind of legal team to defend him in what could be a very high-profile criminal case?
And let's be clear, Brad, in this case, it's been argued that he's been forum shopping, meaning he got this civil filed motion in front of a Trump appointed judge, Judge Aileen Cannon. But she's not having it either. She entered an order that basically told his legal team, you guys need to let me know how I can even address this issue, why it's not in front of the magistrate judge, Bruce Reinhart, and whether or not there's anything that I can even give relief to because it was such a poorly drafted motion. But eventually, if they get it right, which I'm not sure that they eventually will get it right, what relief could Trump get in the immediate sense to try to pump the brakes on what's been happening in terms of the National Archives and the FBI having seized all of this information?
Yeah, and so I'm waiting to see what they file tomorrow to see how they clarify this before Judge Cannon. But what the most obvious relief they're seeking right now is just the special master. Mind you, it's already been 2 weeks. The FBI has already been going through all these records, and the only thing the special master would be considering was what was seized 2 weeks ago. The stuff from months ago has already been sorted and documented by this point. We're long past that. So that would be the one possible area of relief they might get. Mind you, it's not clear how a special master could be involved here because I've never heard of one for classified records. The only cases they cited to had to deal with searches of attorneys' offices. Donald Trump's not a lawyer, so I have never heard of it for this kind of situation. And they provided nothing but rank speculation to try to call into question the ability of the FBI filter team to properly handle this. The FBI has already started returning stuff to him that they didn't ultimately need that fell outside the scope of the warrant. It's not clear what they'll be able to produce that flies in court as opposed to on cable news that will really persuade the judge.
So, Brad, we learned from the New York Times that one set of documents taken from Mar-a-Lago by the FBI had the highest level of classification. Now, that's kind of your wheelhouse, right? So can you walk us through very quickly the levels of classification and what kind of information would warrant the highest classification?
Sure. So under the executive order, which dates back to the Obama era, because President Trump never changed it with a new one, there are basically three levels of classification. There's confidential, which is the lowest, there's secret, and there's top secret. The stuff that has had the most attention from this raid were things that were classified top secret and that also required either what's known as SCI or sensitive compartmented information access eligibility or SAP, special access program access eligibility. Those are some of our most sensitive pieces of intelligence. That's in phone intercepts, that's data intercepts, that's satellite imagery, any number of key, the crown jewels for the intelligence community. Those are the kinds of things that, according to the government, if it gets leaked out, if it gets in the hands of an unauthorized party, can cause exceptionally grave damage to the national security. That's the kind of stuff that when Edward Snowden leaked all his documents a decade ago, required NSA to rebuild entire capabilities because what he had exposed had eliminated their ability to run them, given now what foreign governments knew about it.
So, Brad, there is some reporting as well that Trump himself was overseeing the review of documents, that he excluded some aides actually having their own eyes on it. So to the extent that we've always talked about intent, because you have to have some knowledge of the basis of the crime that's being committed. You have to have some intent to be able to violate a crime. Does Trump have to have the intent to have violated some of these statutes in order to have some type of criminal exposure here?
Yes, particularly so with the relevant Espionage Act provisions that deal with the willful retention of information relating to national defense. So if this had just been a case where he had taken the documents to Florida, the archives had come to them, said, hey, we need documents back, and they found these classified records, and he had turned everything over at the time and been cooperative and hadn't been fighting them over 18 months, this never would have been a criminal matter. Even if the Justice Department reviewed it, they generally don't bother prosecuting in that kind of situation. You know, it's more of a oops, sorry, mistake, and they let it go. It happens a lot. What is causing him exposure here is the obstruction and the concealment, that he was purposely going through the records, that he had his staff reorganizing and resorting out what was in these boxes, that stuff was being moved out of the storage room in the basement into his personal office, into a closet in his personal office. That's what's putting him at risk of actually getting indicted under not only the Espionage Act, but the two obstruction provisions that were cited in the search warrant. It reflects a willful intent on his part to conceal this and prevent the government from recovering these classified records.
It is Friday, the 26th of August of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Indeed. Well, have not had any time to consider the unsealing of the affidavit. Of course, we put ourselves in a bubble news-wise because we have enough on our plate, which we do today, and we're going to get right into the news read here because we have some longer pieces that seem important to get through. But before we do that, a little bit of housekeeping here. Monday, we are not going to have a show. I thought maybe I could record a show. We'll do something. We'll have something in its place. Possibly I'll just have news clips. Otherwise, we'll have some great content for that hour. That is the day that my mom goes into the hospital for her hip replacement. And the prep time starts about 2:30 in the morning. Yeah. And then I have to have her at the hospital at 5:30 in the morning here. And I don't think I'm going to be ready to do a show, even if I was able to get back in time. So it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. And pretty sure we'll have a Tuesday show. She may be in a bit of discomfort, so and may need a bit more attending to during this time when I usually put her to sleep. Or I feed her, let her lounge about, and then she takes a little nap, and then after the show, we're up and ready to go. What's going on here? It's Friday. Just bear with me, folks. So that is what is going to happen on Monday, and we'll play Tuesday by ear. I'll give you a heads up. Somehow, well, we have a whole radio station in which to do it, so listen in. Otherwise, I'll post it on social media, and you know where that is. Okay, so why don't we go over what we have in store for you here in this salon, or a store, that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yes, the documents seized at Mar-a-Lago are the crown jewels of the intel community, and that's why he wants them back. He had a job to do. And it kind of makes you wonder what Lavrov's already taken to Vlad already. So what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? The 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals voted to uphold a Jim Crow voting law that Mississippi's white supremacist leaders in 1890 had adopted in an attempt to disenfranchise black residents for life. Sound familiar, huh? A Nebraska high school shuttered the school's award-winning 54-year-old student newspaper just days after its last edition that included articles and editorials on LGBTQ issues, and that is against the law. And widespread voting machine tampering during the primaries by Trump activists is causing a concern for the fall election. I call it a feature, not a bug. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Myanmar's military junta arrested a former British ambassador and her husband and are holding them in a prison labor camp. For what? For not filling out a change of address form on time. And Italy's worst drought in 70 years has exposed the piers of an ancient bridge over the Tiber River, once used by Roman emperors. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso type coffee drink once a month, thereby becoming a Patreon of Netroots Radio, you know, that helps us pay our bills so that we can fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. And for those of you who have been doing so for many years, thank you for your generosity. It really does sustain us and keep us going. You're our, as Tom says, you're our biggest contributor. So thank you. All right, as loud trucks go off in the background. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Not about, it's actually at, because it's automated. Isn't that nice? Anyway, the show notes and links are an integral part to this concern, this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because that is where the real reportage is. So follow me on Twitter, and you can find those show notes and links, diaries, there. There you go. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up the podcast by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, really wherever podcasts can be found, and the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library from the last 11 years, and we'll be going on 12 years after the turn of the year. You can find that at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay. Got those niceties out of the way. Let's get into this first offering here. It's out of the Mississippi Free Press. So there's a little bit of bouncing that this particular website has performed. So let's see if it settled down. Ashton Pittman, you may know that reporter, is the reporter of this offering here in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Bistro Cafe. The Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals voted to uphold a Jim Crow law that Mississippi's white supremacist leaders adopted in 1890 in an attempt to disenfranchise black residents for life. White lawmakers had designated certain crimes they believed black people were more likely to commit as lifelong disenfranchising crimes. The court's conservative majority admitted that the Jim Crow law was, quote, steeped in racism. But it said that the state had made changes in the 132 years since to override its white supremacist taint. Well, only white people would say that, wouldn't they? A 2018 analysis found that the law still disproportionately disenfranchises black Mississippians compared to white residents, so it seems to be working pretty good. In a statement, the Mississippi Center for Justice, which filed the lawsuit against the state of Mississippi in 2017, said it will appeal the ruling in Harness v. Watson to the U.S. Supreme Court. The provision was part of the 1890 plan to take the vote away from black people who had attained it in the wake of the Civil War, said Rob McDuff, an attorney for the group, who argued that Jim Crow violates the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection under the law. Unfortunately, the Court of Appeals is allowing it to remain in place despite its racist origins. Despite the setback, we will continue to battle and review in the U.S. Supreme Court. The Fifth Circuit is based in New Orleans and handles cases from Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi. Republican presidents appointed most of its judges, and the judges in Wednesday's majority did not sign their names to the ruling on the voter disenfranchisement law. Staff at the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Administrators at a Nebraska school shuttered the school's award-winning student newspaper just days after its last edition that included articles and editorials on LGBTQ issues, leading press freedom advocates to call the move an act of censorship. The staff of Northwest Public Schools' 54-year-old Saga newspaper was informed on May 19th of the paper's elimination. The Grand Island Independent reported 3 days earlier the newspaper had printed its June edition, which included an article titled Pride and Prejudice, LGBTQIA+, on the origins of Pride Month and the history of homophobia. It also included an editorial opposing a Florida law that bans some lessons on sexual orientation and gender identity, and dubbed by critics as the Don't Say Gay law. Officials overseeing the district, which is based in Grand Island, have not said when or why the decision was made to eliminate the student paper. But an email from a school employee to the Independent canceling the student paper's printing services on May 22nd said it was because the school board and superintendent are unhappy with the last issue's editorial comment. The paper's demise also came a month after its staff was reprimanded for publishing students' preferred pronouns and names. District officials told students they could only use names assigned at birth going forward. Emma Smith, Saga's assistant editor in 2022, said the student paper was informed the ban on preferred names was made by the school board. The decision directly affected Saga's staff, and a writer, Marcus Purnell, a transgender student who saw his byline changed against his wishes to his birth name of Megan Purnell in the June issue. It was the first time that the school had officially been like, "We don't really want you here," Purnell said. "You know, that was a big deal for me." Northwest Principal P.J. Smith referred the Independent's questions to District Superintendent Jeff Edwards, who declined to answer the questions of when and why the student paper was eliminated, saying only that it was an administrative decision. Well, I have experienced very similar dynamics as this. And what we did is that we made a rather popular and widely distributed across many, many high schools in Southern California an underground paper that we called Public Occurrences. Yeah, that Public Occurrences. Christina A. Cassidy and Colleen Slevin of the Associated Press bring us this rather disturbing offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. On the last day of voting in Colorado's June primary, a poll worker sent to wipe down a voting machine found a concerning error message on its screen. USB device change detected. The machine, used to mark ballots electronically, was taken out of use and an investigation launched. The message raised concerns that a voter had tried to tamper with it by inserting an off-the-shelf thumb drive. The incident heightened concerns among election officials and security experts that conspiracy theories related to the 2020 presidential election could inspire some voters to meddle with or even attempt to sabotage election equipment. Even unsuccessful breaches, like the apparent one in the county south of Colorado Springs, could become major problems in the November general election when turnout will be greater and the stakes higher, causing delays at polling places or sowing the seeds of misinformation campaigns. Activists who promote Okay, so they're finally getting to the activist part. Thank you. Trump activists. Try that one. Activists who promote the false claim that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Trump have been traveling the country peddling a narrative that electronic voting machines are being manipulated. They have specifically targeted equipment made by Dominion Voting Systems, which has filed several defamation lawsuits and said that post-election reviews in state after state have shown its tallies to be accurate. This is yet another example of how lies about Dominion have damaged our company and diminished the credibility of U.S. elections, company spokesperson Stephanie Wallstrom said in a statement to the AP. Despite no evidence of widespread fraud or manipulation in the 2020 election, the voting machine conspiracies have sunk in with a wide swath of Republican voters. Many of them have berated county commissions throughout the country, seeking to ditch voting equipment in favor of hand marking and hand counting all ballots, which we've only been asking for that forever. Now why do they want to do it? So they can just throw the votes away? I wouldn't put it past them. The incident in Pueblo County highlights a troubling reality that any voter propelled by conspiracy theories could try to tamper with the voting machines. You get people motivated and activated, and who knows what they're going to come up with to fight machines they don't trust, said election technology expert Kevin Skoglund. While it's difficult to stop such vigilante attempts, experts say the nation's election infrastructure is well positioned to detect them quickly. as the Colorado County was able to do, not only does election security involve layers of defenses, but a majority of the country now uses hand-marked paper ballots. That means an accurate tally can be reached in case something does go wrong and the results questioned. Perhaps more concerning is what could happen during the time election officials are investigating a suspected attack and working to validate the results. That's when people can exploit the uncertainty and sow doubt about the election outcome. False claims by Trump and his allies that the 2020 presidential election was rigged have been widely debunked and discredited, with no evidence of widespread fraud or manipulation substantiated nearly 2 years after the election. Numerous judges, some appointed by Trump, dismissed lawsuits filed after the election. That would be 62. While Trump's own attorney general said the Justice Department found no fraud that would have changed the results. Lies about the 2020 election have led to security breaches at some local election offices, including one in Mesa County, Colorado. Authorities in a handful of states are investigating whether officials provided access to their voting systems to conspiracy theorists. And they want to stack the election boards with more people like them. It's only going to get worse unless we set our foot down. And while we do that, why don't we go to our break? And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, The American Express Connection, or Gig Day Afternoon. Emily the Criminal is written and directed by John Patton Ford and stars and is co-produced by Aubrey Plaza, who plays Emily, a drowning person shackled to a low-pay, no-rights food delivery gig by past DUI and assault convictions, and thousands of dollars in student loan debt. A co-worker hooks her up with a credit card fraud side hustle, and we're off and running. First off, the acting is spot on. Plaza, Theo Rossi, everyone sinks these short scenes and naturalistic dialogue. Second, the storytelling is well done. Ford gives cinematographer Jeff Bierman a handheld camera to pummel us with a series of unstable tight shots and close-ups, delivering a chokingly claustrophobic film that makes us see and feel how Emily is trapped. Harrison Atkins' abrupt edits further the unsettling and aggressive feel of this world, and Liz Toonkill's production design gives us a dirty and sweaty LA even in spaces that are moneyed and swank. The gestalt harkens to early 70s American New Wave, no surprise, since Dog Day Afternoon, The French Connection, those are some of Ford's favorite movies. Okay. Let's step back, which is something the film rarely allows you to do. It's problematic to have very rich, very beautiful people make movies, for the well-off, about characters who are poor and desperate, and I brace when the film places a foot in two moral camps. Though we see Emily pushed by a world crafted by unabashed, opportunistic exploitation, one of the few scenes of length suggests that there's something in Emily that takes to crime, an impression enhanced by how other the film makes her, a Jersey girl in L.A., isolated by the close-ups, alone even in crowds. Though Plaza herself likes this criminal essence, it strikes me as lazy morality. Sure, the world is hard, but people do bad things because they're bad people. Though Emily the Criminal gives us much, its questions deserve more. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
We know the stars sparkle at night, but what's happening inside those balls of gas? Connie Arts uses observations and complex math to answer this question. She shares the 2022 Kavli Prize in Astrophysics with Jürgen Christensen Dalsgaard and Roger Ulrich for their work studying the pulsations of stars to learn more about their inner workings. Scientific American Custom Media, in partnership with the Kavli Prize, spoke with Connie to learn more about her contribution to this work. Connie Arts has spent her life watching the sky.
People tell me I still do that today. When I exit a house or a building, I automatically look up.
It all started when she was a young girl. Her family lived on a remote, sandy road with no streetlights, so she had a great view of the stars.
So looking up was natural to me as a child, and I was just curious what happens inside these tiny little dots in the sky.
She dreamed of being an astronomer.
But, I come from a workers' family, so I had no connection to any cultural life or higher education, let's say.
Connie assumed that her dream was out of reach. But all of that changed after a conversation with the head of her primary school. He noticed that she was excelling at math.
And he really asked, what do you want to become later? And so I said, well, if I can choose an astronomer, but my mother wants me to become a seamstress. I don't like that at all.
The head of her school didn't like that either. So he worked with Connie on a 10-year plan. He even talked to her mother.
He said, I will convince your mother. I will tell her that you would be far better off in your future. And I'm sure I can convince her to let you go to a secondary school with a lot of mathematics in preparation of university.
The plan worked. And after lots of effort, including a 3-hour bus and bike ride to her secondary school, Connie found herself in a PhD program, studying astrophysics. By then, she'd specialized in not just any stars, but big stars.
So my PhD topic was to study stars that are more massive than the sun. Those stars, they actually rotate very fast.
To give you a sense of how fast these stars move, Connie says our sun takes about a month to make one rotation. The large stars she was studying revolved in just one day.
When a gaseous ball rotates fast, the physics and the chemistry is more complicated than in stars like the sun. And so I wanted to understand that.
As she was working on the puzzle of how these stars rotate, Connie went to her first academic conference.
I didn't understand much of all the talks. That's the way it is when you go to a first conference as a student. But there was this one talk by Professor Steve Kawal.
He was studying stars as well, but the technique he used was similar to how scientists study the deep interior of the Earth.
If we want to learn what is happening deep inside our planet, well, we can't drill a hole because we can't go deep enough. So seismologists of the Earth, they use earthquakes because earthquakes generate waves, and these waves travel inside our planet. They are the tool for the seismologists to get to the physics and the chemistry deep inside our planet.
Stars might just look like little dots in the sky, but they have their own quakes as well. When the gas in a star heats and cools, it causes the surface to pulse.
So these tiny fluctuations give a change in the brightness of the star over time. And so by measuring these brightness variations, we can deduce the frequencies of the waves that are actually happening inside the star, because it's not only the surface, it goes up and down globally, the gas.
This approach is known as astroseismology, and the professor at Connie's conference was using it to understand the rotation of collapsed stars.
And for me, that was such an eye-opener. I thought, well, I can apply it to my massive stars if I could only have the measurements.
But this was back in the 90s, before scientists had the tools to observe star quakes in space. At the time, astroseismologists had to measure those pulses from Earth. It would take at least a decade to gather enough data to understand the waves pulsing inside a massive star. But that didn't bother Connie.
I don't mind having a plan that takes long. That doesn't scare me at all. On the contrary, I find that motivating.
So when her academic supervisor gave up on a star he'd been studying for more than 10 years, Connie kept going.
Whenever he sent me to the telescope, I secretly continued to monitor that particular star. And somehow I did it until the telescope was demolished.
By then, Connie had 21 years of data about the star. Over her Christmas break, she decided to analyze the data, just for fun.
You see, my work is my hobby. I just like what I do. That's the most pleasant thing to do, is analyze stars. I was analyzing that star after I knew for sure, I will not get any more data with that telescope because the telescope closed down. So that was a good moment for me to say, okay, it's now or never for that star.
Connie sat in her upstairs living room and started crunching the data while her daughter colored downstairs.
And then all of a sudden, I saw the frequencies.
Not just one frequency, but 6, enough to figure out the internal rotation of the star. This had never been done before.
It was actually the first star beside the sun where we had a measurement of the internal rotation rate. That was a breakthrough in our field.
Connie couldn't believe it.
And I was shouting like, ah! Why didn't I see this before? Because it's so, once you have detected something, it's so obvious.
But downstairs, her daughter was unimpressed.
She asked what was going on. And then I tried to explain to her what I had found. And so then she was like, oh, so what, She was a 6-year-old. So what? Nerdy mother, having found something and working again in her holidays.
Her colleagues had a better reaction. Connie's research was published in the journal Science, and it provided a template for finding the internal rotation patterns of other stars.
We realized as a community, okay, we want to do this not for one star, but for hundreds of stars, because they all rotate differently, but you cannot do 100 times 20 years of waiting,
So Connie helped organize a massive data collection initiative
involving tens of astronomers around the Earth, sitting at a telescope in different observatories.
This worldwide project made it possible to avoid some of the gaps in data that naturally happen when you're observing a star on your own, when daylight or bad weather get in the way. More information speeds up the time it takes to decode it.
You can do the same research in about, not 20 years, but less than 2 years.
But the field took an even bigger step forward when those observations went from Earth to space. Missions like the Kepler Space Telescope made it possible to study stars you couldn't even see on land.
We had the methods in place. It was just a matter of getting more data. And then the Kepler mission gave us thousands and thousands of stars with such data.
Since then, work in astroseismology has exploded, and Connie is right in the center of it. She co-wrote the first textbook about the field with Don Kurtz and her Kavli Prize co-laureate, Jørgen Christensen Dalsgaard. She's also spent time nurturing the next generation of scientists.
If I count master, PhD students, and junior postdocs, I have supervised more than 100 of them, which is kind of a lot.
But her impact expands far beyond those immediate mentorships. For decades, she's led initiatives to recruit students with diverse backgrounds and bring more women into science.
For me, that's very important as a person, that I do bottom-up inclusion, that everybody gets a chance to contribute.
She says this drive for diversity probably comes from her own story, when the help of a supportive teacher changed her path from a seamstress to a scientist. Connie Arts is a professor of astrophysics at KU Leuven in Belgium. This year, she shared the Kavli Prize in Astrophysics with Jørgen Christensen Dalsgaard and Roger Ulrich. The Kavli Prize honors scientists for breakthroughs in astrophysics, nanoscience, and neuroscience, transforming our understanding of the big, the small, and the complex. The Kavli Prize is a partnership among the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters, the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research, and the U.S.-based Kavli Foundation. This work was produced by Scientific American Custom Media and made possible through the support of the Kavli Prize.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC. For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Let's all gather round the campfire, buckaroos, and let old Cactus Jim here tell you about some of today's hardy, hard-working cowboys. Yes, those manly men who live free-spirited, yippee-ki-yi-yo cowboy lives out in the rustic ranch country of the Rocky Mountain West. Oh, wait, that was a century ago. The cowboys who are now humming Home on the Range across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming are multimillionaire and billionaire corporate titans and celebrities like Rupert Murdoch, Bill Gates, and Bruce Willis. They don't really live there nor mix with the locals, nor do they actually ranch their spectacular 300,000-acre spreads since they don't know how. So they hire real ranching outfits to bring in some cattle, sheep, and other ranching accoutrements. Then they fly in on private jets occasionally and strut around like John Wayne. They are, in a word, pathetic. But they surely are land barons, spending up to $200 million each for their vast spreads. Indeed, these dilettantes rule the availability of ranch land and scenic wilderness, pricing out people who really want to ranch and locking out families who want to experience some of nature's most majestic rivers and mountains. 15 years ago, the biggest private landowners held 27 million acres. Now, they've grabbed 42 million acres for themselves. Well, say apologists for wealth concentration, they bought the land with their money, so it's fair and square. But hold on, Slick. They don't come here just for the views, hunting, and exclusivity. Their ranches get generous land subsidies. Plus, states like Wyoming provide no-tax hideaways for their wealth. This is Jim Hightower saying, so even though you and I are shut out of these gated land baronies, at least we can take pride in knowing that it's our tax dollars that help the rich buy them and lock the gates. There. Doesn't that make you feel better? Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1839. That was the day that the Amistad sailed into Long Island, New York. The Amistad served as a Spanish slave ship. 53 captives, led by an enslaved rice farmer by the name of Joseph Sink, had revolted against their captors and taken control of the ship. They came from what is now Sierra Leone, Africa. They had endured the brutal Middle Passage on a Portuguese slave ship, the Tacora. They had landed in Havana, Cuba, where they were transferred to the Amistad. From there, they were supposed to sail to a Cuban sugar plantation. The transaction was illegal. Most of the major slave destinations in North and South America had outlawed bringing in newly enslaved people. But since existing slave labor was still used in these areas, the illegal slave trade continued. On July 2nd, the African captives escaped their chains and set upon their captors before they could load their guns. They killed the ship's captain. The Africans demanded to be returned to Sierra Leone. The U.S. Navy intercepted the Amistad as it sailed up the U.S. coast. The Africans were thrown into prison and charged with murder. The case garnered national attention and made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Former President John Quincy Adams presented the defense for the accused. The court found in favor of the Africans. 35 were returned home. The others had died while incarcerated or at sea. The Amistad became the subject of a 1997 film by Steven Spielberg. And while the Amistad became famous, it was not the only one. Similar uprisings were attempted on hundreds of slave ships during this era.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, and it looks like we're in a bit of a cooling trend. Should only get to the low to mid 90s today, with sunny conditions throughout the day, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy overnight with lows in the upper 50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and intervals of clouds and sunshine tomorrow with highs only in the mid to upper 80s. Oh my! Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon stands at 498,089 confirmed cases, and the deceased stands at 572 dead. Let's not forget, we're going on 2 million people in the United States dead from this disease, and it is still killing people. Though, on a bright note, grass pollen is rated only low as the predominant pollen here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 35 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is high at level 7. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 86%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 75 degrees and sunny. Paris is 80 degrees and sunny. Rome is 88 and fair with a heat advisory. Kyiv is 84 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 61 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 82 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 81 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 52 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 84 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Regine Gabodo and Rebecca Tan of the Washington Post brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Myanmar's military junta has arrested a former British ambassador and her husband. A government spokesman said last evening, Thursday, that the couple were being charged with violating the country's Immigration Act. Vicky Bowman served as British ambassador from 2002 to 2006 and is now the director of the Myanmar Center for Responsible Business. Her husband, Hyetin Lin, is a prominent artist and former political prisoner. The couple were arrested at their residence in Yangon and have been sent to the notorious Insen prison. A brief statement from a Foreign Affairs spokesperson in London said the authorities were concerned by the arrest of a British woman and providing consular assistance. The arrest is likely to deepen the isolation of Myanmar's military junta, known as the Tatmadaw, which seized power in a coup last year. The military has cracked down on dissent, arresting thousands of protesters and political figures, including Nobel Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. Human Rights Watch called for the couple's release, saying their arrest was outrageous and unacceptable. And on Thursday, Britain imposed sanctions on businesses linked to the military, although the announcement appeared unrelated to the arrests. Britain is also backing a genocide case against Myanmar at the International Court of Justice for its treatment of Rohingya Muslims and has expressed support for Myanmar's National Unity Government, a shadow administration operating in exile. Britain was among many countries to condemn the junta's recent execution of pro-democracy activists. Its top diplomat in the country, Pete Vowles, said last month he was forced by the junta to leave, but glad we didn't cave to pressure to legitimize their brutal coup.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Italy's worst drought in 70 years has exposed the piers of an ancient bridge over the Tiber River, once used by Roman emperors, but which fell into disrepair by the 3rd century. 2 piers of Nero's Bridge have been visible much of the summer near the Vittorio Emanuele Bridge that traverses the river near the Vatican, a pile of moss-covered rocks where seagulls now sun themselves. The bridge was built in the 1st century for Emperor Nero to reach his gardens near the Janiculum Hill, near what is present-day St. Peter's Square. The bridge was already falling apart by the 3rd century, and traffic was diverted to the nearby Sant'Angelo Bridge, which funneled pilgrims past the Castel Sant'Angelo to the Vatican. Nero's Bridge originally is believed to have had 4 piers, but 2 were dismantled in the 19th century to allow for a better flow of river traffic. In normal water level years, one of the bridge's piers can often be seen in the driest season, but this year, 2 are visible. The Italian government has declared a state of emergency in several regions because of the prolonged drought and the accompanying heat wave, and the drought has also exposed a World War II tank in Italy's largest river, the Po, as well as 20th century ordinance in lakes. Well, well, well. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Tuesday because we're off on Monday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Tuesday because we're taking Monday off. That's right. We'll meet up here on Tuesday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum.